The battlefield was a cacophony of chaos, explosions lighting up the darkened sky, the acrid smell of burning metal filling the air. Captain Elias had fought in countless wars, but this one felt different. The alien forces were relentless, their technology far superior to anything humanity had ever encountered. He remembered the last transmission from his unit before everything went black. Retreat! Retreat! His comrades' voices were drowned out by the deafening roar of an enemy ship descending upon them. When he opened his eyes again, it wasn't on Earth or any battlefield he recognized. Instead, he found himself lying on cold metallic ground under flickering blue lights. Pain shot through every nerve in his body as he tried to sit up, only to realize that most of his armor was gone and his uniform was torn and bloodied. A strange figure loomed over him, a humanoid alien with translucent skin and glowing veins. It spoke in a language he didn't understand, its tone calm yet urgent. Elias passed out again, waking intermittently in what seemed like a medical bay aboard some kind of alien vessel. Days, or maybe weeks, blurred together as they patched him up, feeding him nutrients intravenously while monitoring his vitals closely. Through fragmented conversations between the aliens tending to him, he pieced together bits of their language, enough to know they weren't part of the invading force that had ambushed his squad. These beings called themselves the Veilins, a nomadic species known for rescuing survivors from war zones across galaxies. Eventually, Elias regained enough strength to ask questions. One of the Veilins, whose name translated roughly to Lightkeeper, explained that they'd stumbled upon him during one of their routine salvages near the wreckage of Earth's fleet. They assumed he was dead at first glance but detected faint signs of life. Against all odds, they brought him aboard, saving him from certain death. But there was something else Lightkeeper mentioned casually, almost dismissively. Your people, they think you perished. At those words, Elias felt a chill run down his spine. He thought about his wife, Leora, the love of his life, and how she must have mourned him. She would have received the standard notification sent to families of fallen soldiers, accompanied by empty condolences from commanders who barely knew him. The pain of imagining her grief hit him harder than any wound inflicted in battle. Yet, mixed with guilt came determination. He needed to get back to her, no matter what it took. The Veilins agreed to help him return home once he recovered fully, though they warned him of the dangers ahead. Humanity's relationship with most extraterrestrial civilizations remained tense at best, hostile at worst. Traveling through contested space without proper clearance could mean capture, or worse. Still, Elias refused to entertain the idea of staying away. Every fiber of his being yearned to see Leora again, to hold her and tell her he was alive. What the Veilins didn't know, and what Elias couldn't bring himself to say, was that Leora wasn't just human anymore. Years ago, after a diplomatic alliance between Earth and the Zenturi hive, she'd been chosen to bond with their queen, becoming not only her consort but also a bridge between two vastly different species. Their marriage had sparked controversy among both humans and Zenturi, but neither cared. Love had transcended biology, culture, and even politics. Now, as Elias prepared for the journey back, dread coiled in his stomach. How would Leora react when she saw him? Would she still feel the same way after all these years? And what of the Zenturi queen? Would she see him as a threat, an outsider encroaching on her territory? Questions swirled in his mind, each more unsettling than the last. All he could do was hope that love, if it truly existed between them, would endure the test of time and distance. Traveling through the vast expanse of space was unlike anything Elias had ever experienced. The Veilin ship moved silently, its engines humming faintly as stars streaked past the viewport like streaks of paint on an endless canvas. Though grateful for their assistance, Elias couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled deep within him. The Veilins were kind, yes, but their motives remained unclear. Why go out of their way to save a stranger from a dying planet? What debt did he now owe them? As days turned into weeks, Elias spent much of his time learning about the Zenturi from the Veilins' archives. They were a proud and ancient race, ruled by queens who commanded not just loyalty but reverence. The bond between a queen and her consort was sacred, woven into the very fabric of their society. To disrupt such a union, even unintentionally, could provoke consequences Elias couldn't begin to fathom. Yet, despite his growing understanding of their culture, one question plagued him above all others. Did Leora still love him? He replayed memories of their life together before the war, searching for answers in moments frozen in time. Her laughter echoed in his mind, soft and melodic, like wind chimes dancing in a gentle breeze. He remembered the way she used to look at him, her eyes brimming with warmth and admiration, as though he were the only man in the universe worth seeing. Those memories gave him hope, but they also stung with a bittersweet ache. Too much time had passed. Too many things had changed. Finally, the day arrived when the Veilin captain announced they were nearing Zenturi-controlled territory. Elias stood by the viewport, staring at the swirling nebula ahead, where the Zenturi homeworld orbited a distant star. Anxiety gripped him like a vice. What would he find there? Would Leora recognize him? Or worse, would she turn him away? The Veilins escorted him to a smaller shuttlecraft designed for atmospheric entry. As they prepared to launch, Lightkeeper approached him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Be cautious," the alien said, his voice low and grave. "The Zenturi are not forgiving. If they perceive you as a threat, they will act swiftly." Elias nodded, swallowing hard. "Thank you," he managed to say, though the words felt inadequate. Without another moment's hesitation, he climbed aboard the shuttle and strapped himself in. The craft detached from the main ship, plunging toward the planet below. As he descended, the world unfolded beneath him, a breathtaking tapestry of bioluminescent forests, crystalline oceans, and towering spires that glimmered like jewels under the twin suns. It was beautiful, otherworldly, and utterly alien. For a brief moment, Elias forgot his fear, mesmerized by the sight. But reality crashed back down as the shuttle landed in a clearing surrounded by armed Zenturi drones. They emerged from the trees silently, their insectoid forms sleek and imposing. Their carapaces shimmered in shades of iridescent green and gold, and their multifaceted eyes scanned him with unnerving intensity. Elias raised his hand slowly, showing he meant no harm. One of the drones stepped forward, extending a claw-like appendage. A sharp sting pierced his neck, and darkness claimed him once more. When Elias woke, he was no longer in the shuttle. Instead, he found himself in a cavernous chamber filled with pulsating organic structures that seemed to breathe and shift around him. The walls were lined with veins of luminous fluid, casting an eerie glow over everything. In the center of the room stood a massive throne made of living tissue, and seated upon it was the Zenturi queen. She was magnificent, her form larger and more regal than any of her subjects. Her exoskeleton gleamed like polished obsidian, and her elongated head bore intricate patterns that pulsed with light. Beside her, draped in silken robes adorned with Zenturi sigils, stood Leora. Elias froze, his breath catching in his throat. She looked older, her once youthful features tempered by years of wisdom and responsibility. Her hair, once a cascade of chestnut waves, was now streaked with silver, framing her face like a halo. She wore a circlet of golden filigree atop her brow, marking her status as the queen's consort. But it was her eyes that struck him hardest. They were filled with shock, disbelief, and something else he couldn't quite place. "Leora," he whispered, taking a tentative step forward. Her lips parted as though to speak, but no sound came out. The queen rose from her throne, her movements fluid and deliberate. She regarded him with an expression devoid of emotion, her gaze piercing through him like a blade. Then, in a voice that resonated like thunder, she spoke. "Were you not dead?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. Elias faltered, unsure how to respond. Before he could gather his thoughts, Leora finally found her voice. I don't understand," she murmured, her tone trembling. "They told me, your ship, everyone said you were gone." Tears welled in her eyes, and Elias felt his heart break all over again. He wanted to rush to her, to pull her into his arms and assure her that he was real, that he was here. But the weight of the queen's presence held him rooted to the spot. "I survived," he said simply, his voice hoarse. "By some miracle, I survived. And I came back for you." For a fleeting moment, he thought he saw relief flicker across Leora's face. But then the queen stepped forward, her towering form casting a shadow over them both. "You dare return to my domain," she intoned, her voice colder than the void of space. "After abandoning your duty, leaving my consort to grieve, and disrupting the balance of our union?" Elias swallowed hard, meeting her gaze with as much courage as he could muster. "I never abandoned anyone," he replied, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "I fought for my people, for Earth. I didn't choose to leave. And I certainly didn't choose to come back to hostility." The Queen tilted her head, studying him as though trying to decipher whether his words held truth. Behind her, Leora wrung her hands nervously, caught between the two forces colliding in the room. Before the Queen could respond, a sudden commotion erupted outside the chamber. Guards rushed in, their claws clicking against the floor as they reported in hushed tones. The Queen's antennae twitched, and her expression darkened further. "An intruder has breached the perimeter," one of the guards hissed. "Human." Elias's stomach dropped. Another human? Here? On the Zenturi homeworld? It didn't make sense. Who else could possibly have followed him, or preceded him, to this place? The Queen turned her gaze back to Elias, suspicion burning in her eyes. "Explain this," she demanded, her voice laced with venom. "Is this part of some scheme? Have you brought invaders into my realm?" "No," Elias exclaimed, shaking his head vehemently. "I swear, I don't know who that is. I came alone." But the Queen wasn't listening anymore. With a wave of her clawed hand, she signaled for the guards to seize him. As they dragged him away, Elias locked eyes with Leora one last time. Her face was a mask of anguish, her tears flowing freely now. "I'm sorry," he mouthed silently, knowing full well she might never forgive him for coming back. And with that, he was taken to the depths of the hive, where shadows loomed and secrets whispered in the dark. Elias sat in the dimly lit cell, his mind racing as he tried to piece together what had happened. The Queen's accusations weighed heavily on him, her distrust palpable even hours later. But it was the mention of another human intruder that gnawed at him the most. Who could it be? Someone from Earth? A deserter? Or perhaps someone sent by factions that opposed the alliance between humans and the Zenturi. The cell itself was unlike anything he'd ever seen before, a living organism, its walls pulsating faintly with rhythmic contractions, as though breathing alongside him. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and something metallic, and the floor beneath him was cool and slightly sticky, clinging to his boots. Despite the discomfort, Elias couldn't help but marvel at the ingenuity of the Zenturi architecture. Everything here seemed alive, interconnected in ways that defied human comprehension. His thoughts kept circling back to Leora. Her face haunted him, those wide, tear-filled eyes staring at him as if she were looking at a ghost. She had aged, yes, but there was something else in her expression, something deeper than mere shock or sorrow. Guilt? Regret? Or maybe fear? The uncertainty gnawed at him, making his chest tighten with every passing moment. Suddenly, the wall of his cell rippled, and a section of it peeled open like a curtain. Two Zenturi guards entered, their movements precise and synchronized. Between them, flanked by their imposing forms, was a figure clad in tattered clothing, their face obscured by a hood. The guards pushed the newcomer forward roughly, causing them to stumble into the cell. As they straightened up, pulling back the hood, Elias's breath caught in his throat. It was a woman, her face gaunt and weary, her eyes hollow with exhaustion. But what struck him most was her resemblance to someone he hadn't seen in years, Commander Valera, one of his former superiors during the war. Except this woman bore scars across her cheeks and forehead, marks that told stories of battles fought long after he'd been presumed dead. "Who are you?" Elias asked cautiously, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman blinked, recognition dawning in her tired eyes. "Captain Elias," she gasped, her voice cracking. "You're alive." "Not according to Earth," he replied dryly, gesturing to their surroundings. "Apparently, neither are you." She let out a bitter laugh, sinking to the floor beside him. "Yeah, well, Earth doesn't exactly keep accurate records these days." She rubbed her temples, wincing as though the effort pained her. "My name is Lieutenant Mara Solis. I was part of the cleanup crew after the fall of your fleet. We were supposed to recover bodies, secure intel, standard protocol. But then..." She trailed off, her gaze distant. "But then what?" Elias pressed gently, leaning closer. Mara hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of one of her scars. We found evidence. Classified data embedded in the wreckage. Information about secret negotiations between Earth's military council and rogue factions within the Zenturi hierarchy. Deals made behind closed doors. Deals involving weapons tech, resources, and hostages. Elias frowned, his pulse quickening. Hostages? You mean humans? She nodded grimly. Yes. Some willingly traded themselves for power or protection. Others were taken against their will. Either way, the lines between ally and enemy got blurry fast. When I tried to report what I'd uncovered, I became a liability. They branded me a traitor, hunted me down like an animal. Her voice cracked, and she looked away, unable to meet his eyes. I've been running ever since. Elias absorbed her words, his mind reeling. If what she said was true, then the situation was far more complicated than he'd imagined. The fragile peace between Earth and the Zenturi might already be crumbling, undermined by corruption and betrayal on both sides. And now, somehow, he and Mara had become pawns in a game neither of them fully understood. Before he could respond, the cell wall rippled again, and a lone Zenturi guard entered. This one was different from the others. Smaller, less armored, with delicate features that hinted at youth. Its antennae twitched nervously as it approached them, carrying a small device that emitted a soft hum. You, it said, pointing at Elias. The Queen demands your presence. Elias exchanged a glance with Mara, who gave him a silent nod of encouragement. Rising to his feet, he followed the guard, his heart pounding. Whatever awaited him next, he knew it wouldn't be easy. But as he stepped out of the cell and into the labyrinthine corridors of the hive, he couldn't shake the feeling that the answers he sought lay just beyond the next turn. The journey through the hive was surreal, each corridor more alien than the last. The walls pulsed softly, as if responding to his presence, and the air carried a faint hum that vibrated in his bones. Shadows danced along the organic surfaces, cast by the luminescent veins that crisscrossed the ceiling. Elias followed the young Zenturi guard, whose nervous energy was palpable. Every so often, it would glance back at him, its multifaceted eyes reflecting a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. As they walked, Elias noticed subtle changes in the environment. The bioluminescent hues shifted from cool blues and greens to warmer tones of amber and gold. The texture of the walls became smoother, less chaotic, suggesting they were approaching a more refined area of the hive. He realized they were heading deeper into the heart of the Queen's domain, closer to her inner sanctum. Finally, they reached a massive archway framed by tendrils of living material that writhed like serpents. Beyond it lay a grand chamber bathed in golden light, its center dominated by the Queen's throne. The structure seemed to have grown larger since his last encounter, its organic design pulsing rhythmically, as though synchronized with the Queen's heartbeat. Surrounding the throne were several high-ranking Zenturi officials, their exoskeletons adorned with intricate patterns that marked their status. The Queen herself was seated, her imposing form radiating authority. Her gaze locked onto Elias the moment he entered, her expression unreadable. Beside her stood Leora, her posture stiff, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She avoided looking directly at him, her focus fixed on the floor. The guard ushered Elias forward until he stood a few paces away from the throne. The silence in the chamber was oppressive, broken only by the faint sounds of the hive breathing around them. You wished to see me, Your Majesty? Elias ventured, his voice steady despite the tension gripping his chest. The Queen leaned forward slightly, her clawed fingers tapping rhythmically against the armrest of her throne. You claim ignorance regarding the other human who infiltrated my territory, she began, her voice resonating like rolling thunder. Yet your arrival coincides with hers. Explain. Elias took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. I swear to you, I had no knowledge of her presence here. Until today, I believed I was the only human who survived the attack on my fleet. Lieutenant Solis's story aligns with mine. We're both victims of circumstances beyond our control. The Queen's antennae twitched, and she exchanged a glance with one of her advisors. Victims, she repeated, her tone sharp. Humans rarely act as victims unless it serves their purpose. Tell me, Captain Elias, Why should I believe you are not part of some elaborate scheme orchestrated by your kind? Before Elias could respond, Leora stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute. My queen, please. He speaks the truth. I can see it in his eyes. The queen's head snapped toward her, her expression hardening. Do not presume to interpret my judgment, consort. Your emotions cloud your perception. Leora flinched but did not retreat. Forgive me, my queen, but I cannot stand idly by while you condemn him without proof. He has done nothing to warrant such hostility. The chamber fell silent, the weight of Leora's defiance hanging heavily in the air. The queen studied her for a long moment, her gaze piercing. Then, with deliberate slowness, she rose from her throne, her towering form casting a shadow over them all. You risk much to defend him, the queen said, her voice low and dangerous. Do you forget your place, Leora? Do you forget what you represent? Leora bowed her head, tears streaming down her face. No, my queen. I remember all too well. But I also remember love, and honor, and trust. Qualities you yourself taught me to value. The queen paused, her claws flexing slightly. For a moment, it seemed as though she might lash out, but instead, she turned her attention back to Elias. Very well, she said, her tone clipped. I will grant you a chance to prove your innocence. But know this, if you betray us, there will be no mercy. Elias nodded, relief washing over him. Thank you, your majesty. I won't disappoint you. The queen waved a dismissive hand, signaling for the guards to escort him out. As he was led away, he glanced back at Leora one last time. She met his gaze briefly, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and despair. Then the archway closed behind him, cutting her off from view. Back in the cell, Mara awaited him, her expression tense. Well? She asked as soon as he entered. What happened? Elias sighed, sitting down heavily beside her. The queen's giving me a chance to prove I'm not working against her. But things are complicated. Mara raised an eyebrow. Complicated how? He hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Let's just say there's more at stake here than either of us realized. And we're going to need allies if we want to survive this. Mara nodded grimly. Allies, huh? Good luck finding any in this place. Elias didn't respond. Instead, he stared at the pulsating wall, his mind racing. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to come together, but the picture they formed was darker and more dangerous than he'd anticipated. Somewhere within the hive, hidden truths waited to be uncovered, and Elias knew their discovery would change everything. Elias couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The cell's organic walls seemed to pulse more erratically now, as if reacting to his unease. Mara sat cross-legged beside him, sharpening a makeshift blade she'd fashioned from a shard of metal scavenged during their brief walk through the hive. Her movements were methodical, almost meditative, but her eyes darted around the room like those of a cornered animal. They're testing us, she muttered under her breath, not looking up from her work. This isn't just about proving innocence, it's about loyalty. The queen wants to see where we stand. Elias frowned, turning her words over in his mind. What do you mean? Mara paused, glancing at him with an intensity that made his skin prickle. Think about it. She didn't kill you outright, even though she could have. Instead, she gave you this chance. But chances like these always come with strings attached. They'll push us until we break, or prove ourselves. Her words hit too close to home. Elias had faced trials before, both on the battlefield and in the murky politics of Earth's military council, but this felt different. This wasn't just survival. It was a test of character, one that would expose every crack in his resolve. And then there was Leora. Her desperate defense of him lingered in his thoughts, gnawing at his conscience. Had he truly earned her trust? Or was she clutching at memories of a man who no longer existed? Before Elias could respond, the wall rippled again. This time, it wasn't guards who entered but a single Zenturi figure cloaked in shimmering robes that flowed like liquid silver. Its face was obscured by a mask etched with glowing runes, and its presence radiated authority. The air grew heavier, charged with an energy that made Elias's hair stand on end. "The Queen requires your presence once more," the figure intoned, its voice layered and echoing, as though multiple beings spoke in unison. It gestured for Elias to follow, ignoring Mara entirely. Elias hesitated, glancing back at her. "What about her?" The figure tilted its head slightly, its masked gaze unreadable. "She remains here, for now." Mara shot him a look that said don't argue, so Elias nodded and followed the robed Zenturi out of the cell. As they walked, the corridors shifted subtly, the pulsating walls dimmed, and the golden veins faded into shadowy blues. The change unsettled him, as if the hive itself were mirroring his growing apprehension. They arrived at a chamber unlike any Elias had seen before. It was circular, with a domed ceiling that spiraled upward into darkness. In the center stood a massive crystalline structure, its surface refracting light into dazzling patterns that danced across the walls. Surrounding it were several Zenturi elders, their forms adorned with intricate carapaces that gleamed faintly in the dim light. Their antennae twitched in unison as Elias approached, and he felt their collective gaze bore into him like needles. One of the elders stepped forward, its voice low and resonant. "You claim ignorance of the schemes plaguing our alliance. Yet evidence suggests otherwise." Elias stiffened. "I don't know what evidence you're referring to, but I assure you—" "Silence!" another elder snapped, raising a clawed hand. "We have heard enough of your denials. Now, you will face the truth." Before Elias could react, the crystalline structure began to hum, vibrating with an otherworldly frequency. A beam of light shot out, enveloping him in a cocoon of shimmering energy. Panic surged through him as he tried to move, but his body felt frozen, pinned in place by forces beyond his understanding. Images flooded his mind, fragmented, chaotic, yet vividly real. He saw flashes of battles he hadn't fought, faces he didn't recognize, and documents stamped with Earth's insignia detailing secret negotiations with rogue Zenturi factions. Among them, he caught glimpses of himself, not as he was now, but as someone else entirely. A soldier wearing his face led a group of humans in covert operations against the Zenturi, their actions sparking rebellion within the hive. "No!" Elias shouted, struggling against the vision. "That's not me." But the images continued, relentless and unyielding. Finally, they settled on a single scene, a human commander standing alongside a hooded Zenturi traitor, signing a pact sealed with blood. The commander turned, and for a split second, Elias saw his own reflection staring back at him. The light faded, leaving him gasping for breath. The elders watched him silently, their expressions unreadable. "Explain yourself," one of them demanded. "I can't," Elias exclaimed, his voice trembling. "Those weren't my memories. They were planted, manipulated. Someone's trying to frame me." The elders exchanged glances, their antennae quivering. Then, without warning, the robed figure stepped forward again, removing its mask. Beneath it was a face Elias recognized instantly, Commander Valera. "You," he whispered, shock rooting him to the spot. Valera smiled coldly, her eyes devoid of warmth. "Surprised to see me alive, Captain? You shouldn't be. After all, death is rarely permanent when power is involved." Elias's mind raced. Valera had been presumed dead years ago, lost in the same battle that supposedly claimed his life. But here she was, alive and working with the Zenturi, and clearly playing a role in whatever conspiracy was unraveling. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, anger burning through his confusion. "Why are you framing me?" Valera's smile widened. "Because you're expendable, Elias. Always have been. Your return disrupts plans years in the making. Plans that require sacrifices, including yours." Before he could respond, the chamber doors burst open, and chaos erupted. Armed Zenturi drones poured in, clashing with unseen attackers. Blasts of energy ricocheted off the walls, casting the room into disarray. Amidst the commotion, a familiar voice called out, "Elias, follow me." It was Mara. Somehow, she'd escaped the cell and fought her way here. Without hesitation, Elias bolted toward her, dodging blasts and leaping over fallen bodies. Together, they sprinted down the corridor, pursued by both Zenturi loyalists and rogue insurgents. "Where are we going?" Elias shouted as they ran. "To find answers," Mara replied, skidding around a corner. "And maybe allies, if we're lucky." As they fled deeper into the hive, Elias realized the stakes had changed. This wasn't just about clearing his name or reuniting with Leora anymore. Something far greater was at play, a web of betrayal and manipulation that stretched across galaxies. And somewhere in the shadows, the true puppet master waited, pulling strings neither Elias nor Mara could yet see. Elias and Mara barreled through the hive, their footsteps echoing against the pulsating walls. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. Shouts, blasts, and the screech of Zenturi drones filled the air. They rounded another corner, only to find themselves face to face with a group of armed humans clad in tattered uniforms. Their leader stepped forward, his scarred face grim but determined. "Captain Elias," he said, lowering his weapon slightly. "We've been looking for you." Elias froze, his mind racing. "Who are you?" The man's lips twisted into a wry smile. "Survivors. Just like you. And we know what's really going on here. The deals, the betrayals, the lies. It's time someone put an end to it." Before Elias could respond, a deafening roar shook the corridor. The queen herself appeared, flanked by her most elite guards. Her eyes burned with fury as she locked onto Elias. "You dare defy me?" she thundered. Mara stepped forward, gripping her makeshift blade tightly. "This isn't about defiance, it's about justice. Your alliance is crumbling because of greed and corruption. You can either help us fix it or watch everything fall apart." For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Then, unexpectedly, the queen lowered her claws. She looked at Leora, who had followed her into the fray, tears streaming down her face. "Do you trust him?" the queen asked softly. Leora nodded without hesitation. "With my life." The queen exhaled sharply, then turned to Elias. "Prove yourself, human. Uncover the truth, or die trying." As the dust settled, alliances shifted, secrets unraveled, and hope flickered faintly in the darkness. But one thing was certain, the battle for peace had only just begun.